One. Jim Joyce. Oh, I
Here we
lost
are.
my. Let's do this again. Jim Joyce.
There we go. There we go. Don't don't
We're
give up on me now. Don't back up now.
we're continuing to stay consistently inconsistent, so which is good.
Yeah, excellent.
Um, I know we just saw each other in Boston face to face a couple of weeks ago, and we're gonna see each
Yep.
other again at good old Frontiers Conference. So shout out
In
to
Berlin.
Roberto and team in Berlin.
Awesome.
I
How's that
know.
shaping up? How's that
I mean,
conference shaping up? I know you're
the agenda looks great.
yeah,
I think there's no secrets. It's out there. I'm just looking forward
yeah,
to seeing all the Berliners and beyond, right?
right.
Just lots of, I mean, it's a global attendance, but it'll be fun.
I
And
always
I
remember
was
that conference
also
because there was a huge announcement. They were very good at kind of creating big announcements at the events, like the what's it called? What's the digital therapeutic
the Digital
formulary?
Therapeutic Alliance, with Megan kind of got announced there and
Yeah, but the
and
whole
and
DIGA platform in Germany, like the government announced it one year, right? Like something
I
big.
think so. I think you're
Yeah,
right.
that's right. Yep.
Yeah. I think you're right. But
So I'm
always
looking
on
for
the
something
cutting
dramatic.
edge.
Looking for something dramatic.
Our guest is texting.
Awesome.
Y yes, go, but be quick. I'm our guest.
He's going to the bathroom.
He needs 30 seconds, but we got shit to talk about. So
Awesome.
always. And if it's an empty screen, then he'll just walk in. So it's all
Right.
good. Yeah, so looking forward to it. And lastly, on that one, they do have a podcast studio, I believe, being set up. So I don't know if you and I can find some time and grab some people. Let's see
Awesome.
if we can do something different this time. I know we have our actually Wednesday and a guest lined
Right.
up also, but
Right.
maybe let's see. No
Let's see.
promises.
Totally. No, I'm
What
there. I'm
else?
going for the pod. I'm going for the pod. We're gonna
Okay,
record something
okay.
there. We'll get some.
All right. If nothing else, just you and I shooting the shit. I know I think our fan club is gonna be with us in Berlin. So
Steve.
shout out.
Awesome. Awesome. And then
Anyway,
you roll
what
into health.
no health, no health for us
Oh,
this year.
what?
We're just I honestly just in a different mode kind of thing. I mean,
Yep.
this is a local trip. We're just
Right.
executing. So no time for FOMO, no time for you know, kind of
Right.
ADD type of conversations. So
I'm all in on that.
just gotta
I'm
stay
going.
focused. Yeah, I mean, listen, you and I both. Um, one other quick thing and fascinating. I'd love. I think our guest is coming in from the pharma world, right? But
Yep.
I just caught this morning while I was making breakfast the All In podcast. So Freeberg was the geek this time. It was 101
Right.
with was listening to the Eli Lilly CEO Dave Ricks. I
Right.
mean, just that company is just going berserk, right? And
Right.
so much to kind of break down in there. And while I've been not loving the fact that the All In crew have become, political correspondents, just
Right.
stay in
Right.
your lane kind of thing. No offense, gents. I love some of you
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, but this one is I enjoyed. So anyway,
Yeah.
so
No,
let
that's
let
great. It's amazing these podcasts, these like tech startup podcasts. Here, let the guy in here. But
yeah
it's
yeah yeah
amazing
yeah.
these tech
Well,
podcasts are going so deep in so many subjects, right? Pundits for everything. Here we
yeah.
go.
I mean, it's pretty thoughtful. I'd love to talk and converse.
This is
All kinds of
we
subjects
get
as well. But
the best dressed man in venture, digital health, pharmaceutical joining us.
we uh, we just saw, I think three of us, saw each other in Boston, and Chris turns to me and says, I don't think I've been on the shot. And I'm like, no way. Like, we're kind of all the OGs. Like, you must have been on the shot, right? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I actually had to double check you, dude. Like, when you're like, no, 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 I haven't been. I went to search. Like, I double check because I'm like,
Well,
I could have sworn, but
I,
you
I
know,
was very honored. I think I was in your first 10 invites of the shop. It was
Yeah.
like at the top of your list, and it was COVID, and I was like, I don't know, I just joined,
Yeah,
and
just a
Yeah.
lot of
here
shit
we go.
going on.
Yeah. How did the shot
Exactly.
miss you for that long? We
That's right. That's right. It's
Um,
evolved. I brought my shot of espresso, so I'm appropriately
awesome. I got my WeWork free
hydrated.
beer.
Fantastic. I have the rest of my decaf coffee at 7:30
Thanks for having me
p.m.
on,
here.
guys.
So
Awesome.
So good.
So
pleasure.
so
But
you want to tee him up, Eugene?
yeah, yeah, I mean,
We have Cris De
just,
Luca.
the usual, hey, to our millions of listeners and viewers, tell us who Cris De Luca is. Start from childhood. You can pick up in adolescent years, family, business, whatever. We'll talk
Italian
about
upbringing,
Italy. I don't know.
whatever.
You,
All of
Yeah,
it.
up
I
to
mean,
you.
obviously great hairdo. We met at the barber shop, I think, Eugene, many years. So it's obviously great to be here with you guys. Love obviously this format and forum. I mean, I guess about me, Boston like native, right? So I guess a rare breed these days, along like Jim Joyce. But I guess like being local, but also working in healthcare and not so common. Like many people that are in Boston in this field, are transplants and came for one reason or another. So grew up in that ecosystem, but didn't really grow up in healthcare. So just sort of being part of the fabric of the communities in Boston, Italian household, very
What was your hometown again in Boston? What was your?
I just like through the North Shore. So we went from
Yeah,
like North End families to
right.
East Boston, Riviera Shore, Winchester. It's been a North Shore
That's
moving forward
proper.
trip.
That's right. Right from southern Italy, right to the north end, right through the North Shore, and you made it to Winchester.
I mean, it's sort of
Unbelievable.
an interesting migration story because my father, came over on TWA. Like he was, older,
Oh,
but
wow.
he's from Italy. But my mom's family, my mom was born in Boston. Her parents are from Italy, so it's been sort of like who was born here, who was born there, but everybody in the
Right.
family is from the same exact town in Italy.
Amazing.
Wow.
And so either side, but it's a Boston sort of Italian journey, and everybody's and we grew up going summers there, family over there, grandparents over there. Italian was my first language, and so we grew up very close to the culture. And
Yeah.
Yep.
fast forward, I have three kids. I speak to them in Italian. It's sort of and we
Oh,
take them
amazing.
to Italy and still go to the family village.
Bravissimo.
So it's a very
Bravissimo.
important part of our culture.
Yeah.
Are,
And
are
what
you
did you
guys,
study? What did
are
you
the two
study?
of you gonna,
Speak Italian?
speak
Uh,
Italian?
abbastanza per un piccolo conversazione, not a.
I just know the words that probably are not legit for this podcast. So
Right. But what did you study in what was your because you did you go into the fit like what was your kind of entry into the workplace uh academics?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess undergrad, I studied really business,
Yep.
business administration. I studied at Boston University in Beacon Hill. I'm sorry, Suffolk University in Beacon Hill, did grad school at BU.
Okay.
But I studied in business administration, had sort of a minor in e-commerce. So I loved I mean, it says the field was emerging and it was fusion of computer science meets business. And that was like,
Awesome. Yeah.
surprisingly what I loved. And that was a developing field back in 2000. Date myself, I guess 99,
uh,
graduated in 2001, right? Like, so that was when the field was starting to develop and evolve from pure computer science or pure business to sort of this hybrid land.
Yep.
And that was really interesting. And then, like, sort of later on, I did all sorts, always kind of worked, did all sorts of different activities, but it was one internship. It was a co-op program that Suffolk offered that ended up
Yep.
working for Zurich Scudder Investment. So go figure. It was a investment, sort of shop that eventually was acquired by Deutsche Bank,
Right.
where I was doing sort of computer systems, data operations, infrastructure on the fintech world before it was a fintech thing.
Right.
Uh, and then I really loved the technology aspect of that. Fast forward, I went on to go do grad school at BU, and I wanted a more technical master's. So I did a master of science in computer science, computer information sciences.
Oh, wow.
But that was also so it was kind of the opposite of doing business first and then going more
Right.
technical to want to be able to have the technical sort of chops to understand what I was actually doing business around and having the understanding of that sort of that language.
Right.
And one thing led to another, eventually brought me to Novartis. So that was sort of my foray into healthcare. worked in Nyber when that was really the only, sort of corporation on the block of Kendall Square. So you had like MIT, then you had
Right.
like dilapidated buildings of like old
Right.
factories from like, the Fig Newton factory to the Tootsie Roll factory, and then Novartis, like this palace was built on that side.
I want to work there.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was Nyber was really sort of a carve out that was really, I would say, an innovation entity for the company. And I was just like in love with that whole world, sort of shifting from finance to, the pace of the markets as opposed to the pace of like science and being inquisitive and sort of seeking those miracles of
Yeah.
problem
Yep.
solving, which is much more qualitative and deeper and purposeful than sort of
Yep.
moving money around, which felt a lot more connected for me.
And there, that was that non-molecular innovation or both, even then at Novartis?
For what I was doing, I was on the research informatics team, so
Okay.
it
Okay.
was all tech. I mean, we really worked
Got it.
on high performance computing systems. We worked
Oh, wow.
on finding ways to make research platforms move quicker, from like sort of reimagining the lab environment to thinking of ways that before sort of lab environments were very classical and the design hadn't changed in 100 years, but you had water, gas, a bench, but then everything, like all the computers were sitting outside in clean environments and
So,
never
so
would
you
have.
upgraded the 14.4 modem, whatever, I
So we
forget the
so we worked on things
terminology.
like lab of the future, right? Like how can you imagine a lab and fusing that, digital with physical. And so those were lots of like, pretty
Yeah.
amazing times to work at those digital transformations, what we call them back then. But like,
Yeah.
so like things were like light bulbs. So I was there for 6 years and light bulbs were starting to go off. I'm like, wow, the people in here are so smart and we work in Kendall Square, but
Right.
yet Novartis was a fortress. Like there were
Right.
literally gates around the building, and
Hmm.
you could. And I'm like, wait, we're in this amazing like ecosystem, but we
Right.
keep the walls so tight and
Right.
doors.
Right. Right.
And so I started to like, go to startup events, and I started to like sort of plug into the ecosystem, and that was really what started to put my foot out the door of like the
Yeah,
big
the
company. I said,
fortress.
okay, like there's a lot going on around, and I got sort of bitten by the bug to
Yep.
become an entrepreneur myself. So that was, I started to moonlight while I was at Novartis. Eugene, I think you were doing Health 2.0 around that time, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken. When were you doing
Makes
Health
sense.
2.0?
I mean, I was never, I'll say, full time, like the ran the chapter, but
Yeah, yeah.
what year was this?
You
Just,
brag about it all the time. You
just
launched the biggest chapter. Right? New York chapter was the most successful on the back of
full,
you,
full,
Eugene.
full credit to the crazy Alex Fair. I took it to a certain point. He took it, to being the largest from there, right?
Right.
It, was 0 to 1, 1 to 10, but
He's being
you're
bashful.
talking
Yeah,
2007, eight, I guess, nine.
yeah,
I don't know,
Who knows?
exactly.
somewhere in there.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that was, so obviously the recession was in full force. And then I think there was a similar movement that was happening, which was, if you guys remember, it was sort of the lean startup kind of circle. Lean startup movement was happening where
Right.
it's like, okay, capital isn't really available. Companies are still being born out of necessity because of
Right.
resource, restrained environments. And so people were really into bootstrapping. And it was like,
Yeah.
okay, forget about big venture capital and building a book of debt. Like, let's
Right.
figure out how we can do everything within this small team and, beg, borrow, steal, whatever it is to get things done. And so it was really a focus on, like startups were really focused on that first dollar of revenue as opposed
Yep.
to losing money. And so that was
Yep.
really,
What a concept, building an
oh my
actual
God, like,
sustainable, scalable business.
i.e. like build a small business.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
and I like the little comment, book of death. And I like for a second there I heard book of dead. And I'm like, well, kind of, correlate.
Like you never go away from business fundamentals, right? I mean, it's sort
Right.
of
Yeah.
full circle. So we really picked up on that, and myself and a co-founder, who was actually from the Deutsche Bank days, the DB
Okay.
days, we ended up building a company that wasn't supposed to be a company. So it began as an event called Ultralight Startups, so i.e. sort of bootstrapping
Yep.
mentality. And so we really started to run sort of a monthly Shark Tank competition. I ran one in Boston. He ran it in New York, and we would have this continuous cohort of people that would apply. We would filter it down. There would be 8 presentations, and they would be pitching to investors every month. And so that ran for many years, but it slowly but surely became a business, which
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
the plan. It was more of like let's orchestrate it and to learn more about what's going on.
Yeah.
We
Right.
this sort of this itch to scratch, and then eventually, people from like Amazon started showing up, and Google started to show up, and then GE started to show up, and then Shell Energy and other corporations, like big
Wow.
corporations, were showing up saying, "Hey, you guys clearly know how to find sort of the scrappy early stage startups that are actually building businesses. And we're big corporate innovator sort of groups that we're trying to get closer to the ground floor. Like, can you help us with deal flow?"
Right.
And we produce
Yeah.
these custom innovation programs. That
You're
was
like,
sort of
just
the
don't
pivot.
just don't step on any of them.
Yeah, exactly. But I would say I give these big companies a lot of credit. These were like Fortune 10 companies that were like, we
Right.
can't get out of our own way. We have a core to run, but we realize there's disruption. And, instead of going to the classics or consultants, they came to like scrappy events and said,
Right.
hey,
Yeah.
how can we use you guys as one source of deal flow? So
And were
we
you do so you were doing that full time. You left Novartis and we're running that now full time.
It's a tricky question.
Okay, sorry. I don't need to go there. That's fine.
It's
I
a
heard
trick. No,
Yeah.
moonlighting
I said
and
moonlighting.
Yeah.
People
yeah.
Yeah.
moonlight like I was basically taking like the easy bus back and forth to New York after
Okay.
work, getting back to work the next day. But it was very interesting because then I became suddenly more valuable to Novartis in my day job. So all of a sudden
Interesting.
I started
Yeah.
bringing these concepts back to Novartis. We launched so many things during my day job because of the things that I was doing at night. But eventually I peeled off and did full time.
And interestingly, I, kind of not, it's your story, but I was doing startup while in a big company too, and I found out that I became much more efficient in my quote unquote day job, right? Because like didn't have time for bullshit, right? So
Yes.
just
Yes. Your brain is on a different like
Yep.
you're wired differently when you're doing these kinds of things and you're sort of thinking about every problem through
Yep.
through like, bootstrapping. All of a sudden, if you're like whether it's a day problem or a night problem, it's like problems are
Yep.
seen through efficient, shortest path to solution. And so that was stuff that really, triggered me. I mean, fast forward from that, we started to do this across verticals for energy, oil and gas to high tech to eventually started to pitch to healthcare companies because that's where I was coming from with Novartis. And I pitched to J&J, who was about to open their new innovation center in Boston. And I said, you guys need me to kind of, fill the funnel. We're doing this for all these other companies. And they in turn, invited me to join them to help open the innovation center. So that was sort of a leap
Ah,
into, that my plan wasn't to go back to a big company. It
Right.
was to find this intersection between small and big.
I
And
think that's when I met you because that was I feel like you were J&J when when we maybe were doing an event at the Health Beacon office or something like that there.
exactly right.
That yeah. Okay. Okay. Awesome.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's when I joined J&J. I, jumped in and over the years, I was there for 7 years and got to see everything, right? So J&J is a
Right.
very
yep.
new company, but back to my second pharma, slash consumer and medical device company. And,
Yeah.
oversaw for many years the digital innovation organization
Yep.
globally across pharma, consumer device. And that was like, the
But that
most
was J Labs.
well, J Labs was a component of it. So there was J
Okay.
Labs, the innovation centers were sort of the partnering offices. JJDC was the corporate venture group that was part of
Okay.
it. And also
Hmm.
Janssen Business Development was sort of all these entities were bundled under J&J Innovations umbrella brand. So I
Got it.
had sort of oversight between
That was
partnerships. It was
incredibly
amazing.
ambitious. It was incredibly ambitious, wasn't it? Like I always thought that they would. It was so interesting what they were up to for ages. They were touching so many things, and obviously tons of resources
Totally.
were going into it. Is that's still running? I'm assuming the same level, or don't know.
I have a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the what's interesting, now having been at Novartis and seeing one version, then
Yep.
to go do this as a business for other corporations and like sort of feeding their funnels to then running our own through J&J. There's lots of learnings and lots of sort of ways to
Right.
Hmm.
do it. I would say even those models have evolved, from what was really
Right.
important to do at that time. Those companies have matured. And so nobody's really doing hackathons anymore. It's kind of
Right.
passe.
Yep.
But if you
Yep.
you look forward, if you look at like what the future of those organizations are, I think there are a lot of learnings that have come through it. And one is you can't kind of like make yourself new in the middle of the core, right? So
Right.
you do have to do something that gives people a space and the funding, most importantly, which the
Right.
funding didn't really come with it. Funding and space to do something new. They have to be the cowboys, the rebels, the troublemakers on the
Right.
side for a period of time, but then
It
over
has to
time, you have
migrate.
it has to be
Yeah.
reabsorbed by the organization.
Right.
If
Yeah.
it
Right.
stays as an orphan for too long, then
Yep.
it's not going to be scalable, right? So you
Right.
can inspire, you can shape, you can test new things, but then eventually you have to say, okay, now this is the new fabric of the company, and now we
Right.
are this. And now then a new thing needs to be created to then fix that, you know? So
Right.
there's sort of this
It's almost
cycle that
you have
And
to like innovate the innovation department kind
correct.
of.
Correct.
Right.
Because that gets scaled. So you always have to keep it fresh.
Interesting.
I'm saving my thoughts because I'm moderating a panel actually in Frontiers with
Yeah.
a number of corporate innovation folks. So and most of them
Yeah.
are kind of pharma healthcare. So I'm gonna it's gonna be a cliffhanger for
Hilarious.
our audience here, but I'm
It's
saving
funny.
my
I
thoughts.
have just to stay with that for a second though. At Health Beacon, I had a guy working in Canada, and he came to me and said, "Hey, there's a J Labs event, and they have a category for adherence tools." He's like, "Can I pitch us in for adherence tools?" And so I was like, so many of these contests, I just didn't, I just kind of tried to be careful about which ones you participate in. So I kind of gave him permission. He did it, went and did the pitch, and then he calls me back like maybe 3 months later. He says, "Oh, J&J are sending us 100 grand because we won." And so we
Wow.
were adherence application of the quarter or something. I don't know what it was within Canada somewhere. So it was in like, that was kind of went to some global system.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great. Maybe we'll try to, do some work with them. But we won the best adherence tool, but we still couldn't get really any traction internally to have them, they all liked it. It was just kind of that. So you just see this chasm, right, between like, and here they were cutting us a check for winning because I guess they probably had to because it was probably a contest. But
Right.
but it
But
was nice.
it's all different budgets. I always kind of say it's centralized and distributed. The work gets done in the regions and the brands.
Yep.
Am I going to invest 100 grand into a startup as a region or marketing lead, or am I going to put that towards campaigns that are maybe diminishing returns, but still predictable? I mean,
Right.
shit,
Yeah.
it's fascinating, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of large organizations try to create lots of steps along the conveyor belt of innovation. So, what you figure out is like, let's wind back. Innovation used to be M&A. Like big
Right.
companies would buy small companies and they
Right.
would get there faster by owning something. And they
Right.
said, oh, maybe we don't need to own it. Maybe we'll partner with them. Oh,
Right.
maybe we don't need to partner with them. Maybe we'll invest in them. Maybe we don't. Then maybe we'll just like keep them close. And that's sort of the J Labs thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you bring
Yeah.
them into the family? Like you de-risk them and you watch them through sort of real estate and spaces and sort of
Yeah.
programs. Then you say, okay, these are the winners of those. Let's sort of partner with them. Okay, that's
Right.
working. Let's invest in them. Okay, let's buy them. Let's sort of like you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
kind of think of the different steps along the way. I would
Right.
say throughout all of that stuff, like having been an entrepreneur, having been an executive, I really started to fall in love with the investment side of the house. And as you
Right.
start to look at the venture capital world, it's like, okay, of all of these, which is less likely to be a modality that's a trend? And for me, like venture has been around for over 50 years. It is a
Right.
known staple. I'm not worried about where the money's coming from. I'm not worried about is this like whose territory is this in a large organization? Am I stepping on toes? There's
Right.
always very clear cut teams whose job is to deploy equity in private companies
Right.
for strategic, financial, whatever the flavor of it is. And so
Right.
I started to lean into that at J&J and really liked it. And at the same time, Sanofi called, and it was now we're now we're sort of up to date. That was 2020 in June that I jumped over to Sanofi because the venture. So Paul Hudson had joined as the CEO. He
Right.
was telling the world that Sanofi was all in for digital, and that was really a big deal. To see a
Yeah.
CEO in a
Sure.
pharma
Yep.
company saying that we are committed exclusively to the space, and to be so sort of bold and explicit about it was a big attraction to
Yeah.
me.
And
And
he
the
also
venture team,
he loves Novartis alumni.
that's right.
Right. It's like they're everywhere.
Exactly. Exactly. And so like to see the venture group wanting to add a partner that was going to bring an investment strategy for digital that would then sort of build out this portfolio in world class was a
Right.
really special opportunity for me. And so that I jumped in with both feet, and that's where I've been for the
And
last 3 years.
your remit, sorry, Eugene, your remit right now is Digital Health Sanofi Ventures.
Correct. So Sanofi Ventures has been around since 2012, historically a therapeutics investing shop. We're 8 investors. 6 of those are therapeutics focused. I joined 4 years ago to really build out the digital investing side of the house. Added one person to the team, and now we've doubled in size, so now we're 2 people. And we have let's see, 8 portfolio companies that are sort of digital health, AI oriented, data sciences, and
There
of
you
that
go.
portfolio. Some of those are investments we inherited, and some of those are new investments that we made. And of those, we've made a mix of, I would say today when we invest, it's typically for full board seat. Some of those are, so it's a mix of these companies are 5 directors, full director seats, and the remaining are observer seats from past investments.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And- Go ahead, Eugene.
Wow.
Sorry.
No, so much to unwind, and I'm just it's always kind of thinking about somewhat back to innovation. I look at it, your own journey of let's quote unquote trace and track select. So it's a funnel, right? And as you mentioned, right, Sanofi Venture has been around. Yes, traditionally more life sciences focused. Digital health was a bit of your baby building this out. But if you think about how many startups Sanofi sees across, I'm sure still multiple initiatives, right? And bringing it into the investment vehicle, which I think you said 8, and then ultimately there is an M&A path, and the way like I'm curious how you guys look at it broadly, right? Because on one side there's a keep me relevant, like, hey, I want to know what's happening. But and I hate to say it, 50 grand, 100 grand, ultimately it sounds like a lot of money, but for a big pharma company with, generally speaking, in the market margins, that's not a huge spend to keep yourself relevant versus paying consultants to give you something. Um, and then it just sort of goes. Like, I'm curious how you look at it personally
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, I think governance and sort of the principles of the shop are really important. So also part of this attraction is so you have a lot of flavors of like corporate venture, right? Institutional, but like corporate venture, some shops, and I'm not even just saying in pharma or in healthcare, some of the corporate venture groups want to see a partnership. And then, they'll catalyze that partnership by taking an equity, writing an equity check and kind of
Right.
boosting the relationship. We're the other way around. So we behave more like institutionals. We lead rounds, we co-lead rounds, we take full board seats, we're long-term capital. So we'll go from like seed to Series B and beyond. So we've done a very early stage. We've also done an investment in a Series D. So kind of stage agnostic. What we really care about is sort of being ahead of the curve. So finding things that are really transformational for the company because we could partner, because we could be, have vendor relationships and service agreements and do all that stuff. How can venture really be something special? Like, how can you invest in something that is, I would say, pre-partnering, too risky to become a customer, too early to become a partner? How can we think of something that has the transformational qualities that has also rock star teams and has a good venture business? We talked about sort of the lean start, like good business fundamentals. But
Right.
then the fourth piece is like that also has a strategic component to it. So if all those things are checked off, like how can we think of investing at the right amount? So, we typically put aside 30 million per company as a $750 million evergreen fund, I should say
That
that.
was my next question,
Yep.
actually.
Yeah,
Yep.
so,
Yeah.
so let me back up and say this is a $750 million evergreen fund, single LP allocation, and our goal is to really be a self-sustaining vehicle where we invest in companies. Those are, if they're transformational and they have the highest probability of success from both the financial and strategic, at some point there'll be both a learning for the organization through the upgraded relationship, special partnerships will be unlocked, special, sort of value will be had. And if all goes well and we do our job and they do their job, there's a financial return. We recycle the capital and we invest in more companies. And that's sort of the idea around the whole mechanism. But it's really a very efficient investment committee organization. I am not having 1,000 meetings internally to get approvals on it. So these are
That's
all the things
amazing.
that are really amazing around because you need to move at the pace of the syndicate. We're investing in with other, investors, and
Right.
as soon as you have a side letter and you have strings attached, and you say any,
Right.
3 months to get
Though
this approved, the
And are
deal's
you
gone.
able to
though
move?
Sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I probably have this similar question. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, no, just wondering about that speed, right? Like, so you have to wield this big organization, right? Like you said, but they've given you like a way to do that, right? And do you find, I mean, do you find sometimes that you move faster than the syndicate groups, and some, what's that pacing like?
It's a good question. I would say, so I can't take any of the credit for the governance. This is all to like Jason Hafler, who runs the fund, has really,
Right.
over the
Structured it.
years, and the leaders before that have really built a track record and trust. Even though you have rotation and you have leadership rotation, and ex-com sort of rotation or investment committee, rotation, being able to prove yourself with a track record, I think lets the work speak for itself. And so I think there's high trust. I think there is a proven track record for the portfolio that we've had and with the exits that have returned capital to the fund, which then, when you're bringing opportunities, we're also highly, highly tied into the organization. So, we can sort of finish sentences on where we're going with strategy. Organizations, there's a lot of opportunity for, sort of sharing and cross portfolio sharing. And so I would say that through these mechanisms that are sort of very organic now for the organization, you're not going to internal R&D sort of
Right.
leaders or therapeutic area heads to say, is this a good idea? We are sitting on principles of building our own conviction in the deal so that no matter what, if I invest in this company and I believe in it wholeheartedly, and I've done all my independent diligence, just like you would, with your own money. If you're investing, you're going to turn over every stone. You're going to learn everything you need to know about the team, the tech, the problem it's, sort of solving, and then customer references and all sort of the other things out there. You're going to do that anyway. How fast you do it is on you, right? So that's the pace of however long it takes. I would say the internal piece is really, if you can tie this to something and build an investment rationale, let's say like, should we just partner with these people, or is this something
Yeah.
really that makes sense to be at the table on? And there's like something there, but you can't overlink it because if the partnership doesn't pan out, or if there is a partnership that manifests and then strategies change all the time. Oh, now we're not in that area anymore. You don't let your money kind of waffle with the wind. You need to continue to support the company on the next round through M&A and IPO. We treat it like a financial investment at that point. So
Got it.
we're always looking at companies that, regardless of what happens, we want it to be linked, we want it to be special for the organization. But regardless, we're going to have our own conviction
Right.
around the deal and stick with it from those first principles that we originally invested on.
Super.
Oh, and I was gonna just sort of add to it. I mean, it all depends on, how the org unit was set up to begin with, the charter, for lack of it, the mandate, right? If it's a purely financial ROI vehicle, that's, one mandate. If there's a linkage that has to happen, that's another. If it's in between, I mean, it just all depends on how you set it
That's a
up,
great
right?
point. I would
Yeah.
say a huge measure of sort of call it a KPI, call it like how do we view success? Is it how much money we've returned, or is it how many partnerships? I would say it's really thinking about making sure that our companies are all of our portfolio companies are having meaningful strategic interactions with the organization. So making sure that there aren't these like companies that are sitting on the side that nobody in the organization knows about, and we're constantly finding ways to introduce them, facilitating those meetings, facilitating those interactions. And I would say on the digital side, I would say the bar is it's a little bit easier. Like my hit rate, our hit rate for digital investments, it's almost one to one. Like companies that we invest in, it's pretty easy to sort of then partner with a tech company, software company, and get close to them than it is a biotech company. You have to sort of wait for the right data, you have to wait for the right
Yeah.
program, you have so the sort of cycles are a little bit longer in terms of sort of time. But I would say with pretty record time, we've got these companies that come in, and within a year and a half, I'm seeing really interesting interactions manifest through that. And we don't promise that to entrepreneurs, but we definitely are seeing some success through that so far.
I love the evergreen concept, and I know you're not going to comment on this, but I know there are rumors on Amada, filing, right? I haven't kept up with it in the last couple of days, so hopefully it'll be a nice return into the portfolio as well. Um,
I will abstain from any
Yeah,
further
I
comments.
figured, I expected it, so no worries. But a little bit on that note, right? And again, this is the beauty of on one side being a corporate venturing, right? Because again, Sanofi is a multi-billion beast, right? That across pretty much the whole world. I don't know how many countries you guys are in, and a single LP, where, obviously more traditional venture capital, you're sort of relying on very different, market aspects, right? But how, any thoughts on then how you're looking at in the future, like as far as, looking at other areas, just things that you guys are tracking. So for the entrepreneurs that are listening, that, where your interests are lying. So
In terms of like spaces to invest in or sort of fields
yeah,
of,
sorry.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, no, I think of it as, it's easy to sort of chase trends and sort of let the money follow there. I would say we sort of stick to sort of a core thesis, and I think it sits along like two axes. And one is like the patient journey, where does it hurt? Simple things can also be very lucrative and also be very impactful. So Jim, like your
Yeah.
own company, former company of adherence, like patients need medication. It doesn't necessarily need to be generative AI. They need to like if there's an effective medication that is going to help and proven for over 10 years, like through rigorous random controlled trials and dosing and toxicity, everything has been de-risked. And then the last mile is to help the patient take it. It's like, software can help there and it doesn't need to be, overly sexy or sophisticated or complicated. So I think there's really a whole spectrum of things that we still stick to fundamentals on. I would say like from the patient journey along the way, that also intersects with sort of the drug, life cycle. And so that looks like patient empowerment, like how can we empower patients to the most of their ability, and that's whether it's understanding through medication literacy, adherence, and the whole journey accordingly, or also in care access channels. We invested in an urgent care company and finding
Hmm.
ways to, reimagine us. That's probably a very good example of like use of venture. In order for a large pharma company to partner with an urgent care, network, uh, it just wouldn't be so typical. It wouldn't be the first thing that you would
Right.
think of. And those are they'd be typically going to academic centers and they'd be using sort of classical CROs and in ways of doing research. And so our idea was investing in urgent care could be a way to reimagine, a patient-centric model where, hey, patients are going to urgent care clinics because clearly that in the US, there's a gap. Most Americans actually don't have a primary care physician. They walk in, get stitches, strep test, whatever it is, x-rays and labs in these urgent care facilities. And then from there, they end up going back because it's local, it's their neighborhood, it's their community, it's accessible, and they're already outside of the healthcare system. And so, one of our companies, for example, is already converting those urgent care clinics, those people into primary care patients because they return. And then, we realize that there's a opportunity for clinical research at these locations. So across that network, can we think of clinical research? Can we think of clinical trial recruitment, retention, engagement, completion, sort of that more diverse patients through a different modality where really research hasn't been conducted? We know community clinics are certainly being paid attention to. Can we think of sort of urgent care as that national network? And so that was probably sort of
Interesting.
an example of a mature company. So it's not necessarily early stage. There are now 120 clinics, but also a very innovative way for pharma to think about solving an old problem through a new way.
Before we maybe jump, I mean, super fascinating. And again, right, this is where my light bulbs go off. Kind of, a pharma company. What's ultimately how does it tie to the molecule? Is it not, right? And that's where a little bit, but kudos on kind of pulling that through for the sake of the patient and in community, right? I mean, a lot of the urgent come. Before we go into kind of Jim's sort of final question, when you talk to entrepreneurs, strategic capital comes in all kinds of flavors. Can you guys hear me okay? I think it's my connection.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Feedback.
And, typically, strategics, you want them later in the game, not too early, right? Because there's just a lot of other challenges that come with that. And especially when a strategic joins a board, there's always some of these dynamics of, different board members, different, and what is it? It's called like orphaning a startup because of that 2, 3, 4, 5 year changeover where, individual VCs are there. I'm getting to my question, Chris. But whether corporate or not, whether strategic or not, how do you look at board membership and what is a good board member from your perspective?
A great question. Um, how to slice that? I think
I know there's so many ways.
no, I think it's interesting. Talking about orphan companies for 1 second, I really worry about when I invest in companies, I certainly worry about customers that have companies that have, a customer that's more of like 50% of their bookings or sort of revenue.
Yeah.
It's like these outsized whales that are sort of consuming all these services, that some of that sometimes that could be a pharma, sometimes that could be CRO, it could be health
Yep.
system. You got to worry about that in terms of like longevity. All of a sudden, a change of a CEO and that book of business is gone, crashes your valuation, sort of crashes, you're like doing cuts all of a sudden. So there's really, really caution, I would say, with some of these outlying factors, any kind of outsized
Yep.
representation, whether it's an investor or a customer, is always something to be concerned of. What makes a good board member? I mean, so, what's the job of the board, right? It's to let's see, sort of oversee the strategic, direction of a company, right? So being able to, um, help them achieve their objectives, right? While
Yeah.
protecting the stakeholder interests. Like that's simply, the really good composition of a board is when you have, company representation, investor representation, maybe some strategic representation, and an independent representation. I would say like those are things that are modern day makeup of a board. I'm talking about private companies, public is
Yep.
not. I
Yeah.
don't do
Yeah.
any investing or any public boards. I think it can be really tricky. And you see sort of the qualities that I think have evolved in the world of boards. Is a really good book. It was written by an HBS professor, Jay Lorsch, that authored a book called The Future of Boards, and it sort of talked about the evolving dynamics of governance and sort of the mindset and what the really real role should be. I mean, boards can be either very positive, they can be neutral, or they could be negative, right? There's like sort of three states of boards. And I think the best boards are the boring boards, if I have to
Right.
say that. Like the
The
ones where
pure updates, checkbox,
like
send the
the
notes,
ones where
right?
nothing really, no
Yeah, no,
surprises,
no drama. Yeah.
no drama, no events, like a
It
boring,
will, and also like anything, it's kind of like leadership. It's like predictability, right?
right,
It's like if we achieve these results or we have these things or even we have this kind of crisis,
right,
you almost know how they're going to react. You almost know, like
exactly,
like when when you work for a boss or you are that boss and you're like, it's like people just need to know, okay, if this happens, what's going to happen out of that versus, a dynamic that's not predictable, right? Doesn't help grow a business.
They say the best, excuse me, board members are the ones with their like nose in, but their hands out, right?
Right.
So you want your board to be involved, you want them to be aware, you want them to be supportive, you want them to be, problem solving and helping remove barriers, but you also don't want them operational. And so those are
Right.
this is a range of that evolution that I'm sort of talking about from the book of where board members were, and there's a cultural factor, like depending on which geography. So we're global investors. I have portfolio companies in Silicon Valley, Boston, New York, Israel, sort of like all over the world. And so you have
Very
cultural and
different.
geographical
Yeah.
mindset and behaviors and sort of
And
things.
sometimes regulatory as well. Like they kind of a different, yeah.
But I'm just
Yeah.
talking about sort of the behaviors of board members and
Right.
sort of the
Right.
Yep.
style, like what is the culture of the board and the culture of the company. And you have,
Right.
the sort of Silicon Valley companies and those boards are typically like, let's swing for the fences and let's, put a dent in the universe kind of, mindset. And you have this, hyperscaling or hyperfailing, kind of factors there.
Yeah.
Um, the European ones, I would say, are certainly more cautious and measured.
Mm.
Um, and you have the Israeli, sort of Israeli boards that are more unfiltered,
I'm
and
fighting with each other, but not
I,
really
No
mad.
bullshit.
I would say it's very unfiltered. There's like
Yeah,
what
right.
you think is what you say, and so it's
Yeah,
all on the table, and so just sort of
different.
managing what comes with that territory. And so I think from as an investor and like board member, you have to be aware and how to navigate sort of board
Right.
dynamics, but then also, um, I
Awesome.
think just really supporting the companies and finding ways to be unlocking and unblocking some of the things that they're inevitably going to face.
Love it.
Awesome.
Well, with that, I didn't realize there's a book on it because I think, I felt like entrepreneurs need to get together to write that book. But sounds like somebody else
Maybe a
beat all
chapter
of
in
us
it.
to the punch. But Jim, I'll hand it to you for
Okay,
the
Chris.
final question. I love
So,
this.
so, so we're heading into the future a little bit. So a few years forward, and the Sanofi portfolio is just rocking. There's exits happening left and right. People are wondering how this two-person group that's supporting into this evergreen fund could possibly have done it. So you're asked to go back to BU as the Italian American Executive of the Year because you've had such a turnover and talk about your investment portfolio and you give this great talk and you talk about it. Well, it's board structures and it's exits and it's believing in the founders. And sorry for the fire alarms. And at the end of it, you're so keyed up from the talk that you go to the North End and you're having a cannoli and you're walking through the North End and this very well dressed, handsome young man in a blue sport coat comes running up to you and says, "You're Cris De Luca. You don't understand. Like I went to Suffolk. I did these intern programs. I did a master's in computer science, and now I'm, based on your talk and I've heard about you, I'm starting my own company. I'm doing a digital health technology company that's solving big problems for patients. What's the one piece of advice you'd give that young man in the North End?"
In this very hypothetical scenario, which is very unlikely. Let's see. Let's see. What would be the
Silicon
one
Valley,
piece
swing for the fences.
swing for the fences? So what would be the one piece of advice that I would give this person? And this person is about to start a company. I would say the probability of that idea, sort of stepping back, the probability of that idea working in its originality is low. And so, what are the things that typically de-risk? And whether it's a person that's starting a company or whether it's someone that's going to make
Yeah.
any decision in life, one thing that I didn't really do back then that I would do more now is just seek mentorship. Like seek out many, many, many mentors. Like don't just pick one. And don't that doesn't have to be official, but like surround yourself by people of which you admire, like or which you think you can learn something from, and do that many times over, always. Like do that across your life because I'm shocked. Like I get that scenario, Jim. I get people that reach out to me on LinkedIn, and these are kids in high school. I'm like, where was I in high school? I wasn't reaching out for mentors in high school, right? I was playing soccer and I was like, sort of focused on what was I thought normal at that time. And so I'm just shocked and I'm always awed by people who reach out and ask for help. And it's never too early. And the people that ask typically get it. And
Mm.
so, like seek out mentors, right? Like that's the stuff that people should do. If they ask me for something, they should go ask another 50 people, and that's gonna like really change your mind around the decision you want to make or the problem you want to solve, or like I don't know. I just feel like you have to be exposed and
Love it.
diversify your
Love it.
examples.
We
Yeah,
each
love it.
need our own board of directors, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. You're a gentleman. That's a great piece of advice. Seek mentorship.
See,
Phenomenal.
so
For
cool.
thanks for joining us. For our listeners, hit subscribe, pass it on, and maybe see you next week. Maybe the following. We'll see.
You guys are the best. Keep up the good work. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Chris.